everybody, Gina DeLuca here. Okay, I'm going to be doing a spiral straight board today with almost a rainbow of colors. I don't have green going on here, but we may wind up with some when the blue and the yellow mix. The colors we are using, I have Amsterdam Permanent Blue Violet. This dries very dark. It's very much like dioxazine purple from Liquitex Basics, and it has worked very well in straight pour, so I'm going to give this a whirl. I am using Phthalo Blue from Liquitex Basics, Quinacridone Magenta, the Deep Violet, and I have Vermillion from Artist Loft. So these colors, not this darkest purple, but all of the rest of those colors that I just mentioned. I don't see it, but the yellow is cadmium yellow. Here it is. Cadmium yellow, deep hue, mixed with DecoArt, Americana Decor Satin Enamels, and pure white. So all of these colors, not this darkest purple, but all the rest of the colors have been mixed with the satin enamel. So it's 50% satin enamel, 50% of that colored paint. And then that mixture is considered 1 part paint. So our mix is 1 part paint to 2 parts Floetrol. You could do 3 parts Floetrol if you're using a higher pigment paint. Some paints are, if it's a transparent paint, I wouldn't go more than 2. If it is an opaque, you can go 3 without a problem. The satin enamels are opaque themselves, so when you add them to a transparent paint, it becomes an opaque, or at least a semi-opaque, and you can add a bit more Floetrol. So this base color is just the Amsterdam, no satin enamel, and it is mixed 1 part paint to 2 parts Floetrol. I will thin that mixture with some water if it is necessary. The consistency that we are looking for is about a 2 on my consistency scale. It does make a mound, but it disappears very quickly. It's making a nice thin, even stream off of my stick. If it is not coming off evenly, you need to continue mixing. Major consistency is inconsistent. Before we get started, have you seen the Fluid Art inspiration cards? If you have, you can fast forward about a minute, but if you have not, what we have are 52 cards. There are 42 technique cards. Each technique card has an associated video here on YouTube. It gives you the exact paint brand, consistency, the recipe, of course the technique, all of the things that I can't fit onto a card. This is a picture of the painting in that video. This box contains a tip for this particular technique. Here at the bottom, you have the color palette that was used in this painting. And then these 2 boxes can be used together as the basis of a 2-color palette, or you can build off of those colors. And there are 8 bonus color palette cards. Each one has 5 color palettes. You can use all of the colors or just some of the colors. Mix and match the bonus color palette cards with the technique cards, and you have more combinations than you could ever paint in a lifetime. These are available at my website, ginadeluca.net, and also at amazon.com. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is put some paint in my cup because I want to make sure I have enough to do my pour. I want to make sure I have enough paint there for the paints to react. So you'll notice I've already covered my edges. This is a round canvas and the sides have puckers that make it a challenge to cover. So if you were to not do this first, even if you were to lay down a base coat, you would have a hard time getting the paint in all of the little cracks and crevices of those puckers. So I paint it first with a brush. Also, the way that I mix my paints is pretty thin, and I'm using Floetrol, and that does not always give the best coverage on the sides. So I like to troubleshoot before there's trouble, cover the edges. And you definitely want your edges covered. You can see it's a little thin on this side. So you definitely want your edges covered. When you pour, when you're tilting, so you can see it's like it doesn't even, it just kind of rumbles across. So I use my finger for the sides to really kind of get that wet paint on the edges. If your edges are dry when you are tilting or spinning, you can get some resistance and it won't slide over the edge evenly. So I'm going to pop some of these bubbles that I just created. Popping the bubbles in your base coat will keep it from coming up through your pour. Later on, we're going to put some paint in a cup. Be sure to check your consistency before adding the paint. The sauce may thicken upon standing, and that is exactly what is happening over here. So you want your paints to be the same consistency. If one is thinner than the rest, that one will move faster than the rest. And you'll wind up with some squiggly lines just in one of the paint colors. It's not ideal. It's not what we're looking for. Okay. So I'm going to pour from up high. I want these paints to sink and churn. I'm going to try to not use too much paint. I have a tendency to do that. Okay, my blue. And now for the yellow. I put the yellow in last because I want this to end up in the center. It sounds counterintuitive, but somehow I always wind up with whatever my last cell maker is. I wind up with some of that at the very bottom of the cup, and that becomes my focal point. So it will actually be yellow and then orange and then pink as it's coming out, hopefully. Okay, and then I'm going to add a bit of my leftover background / base coat color. The base coat is what goes on the canvas first. The background is the color that is going to fall to the background as the cells kind of move their way forward. I like to use the same color for my background and my base coat so that I'm just having a hard time here. If I used white as my base coat and there were air bubbles in the base coat, I would have little tiny white cells popping up in my painting that didn't belong there because there's no other white in here. That's why A, we pop the bubbles in the base coat, but B, that's why I use the same color in my background as my base coat, so if I do wind up with some cells, they look like they're supposed to be there. They don't stand out. Okay, now I'm going to do my best to stay in the center, and I'm going to pour kind of quickly, spinning kind of slowly. And I will say this, these paints have been mixed up for a while. These are leftover paints. I don't know what kind of cell action I'm going to get, if any. As I get towards the end of the cup, I get closer to the canvas and I spin slower. This will give me more control. Waiting for the yellow. Uh-oh, uh-oh. Oh dear. All right, well, I had an unintended drip. It'll just become a cell. It's fine. Okay, going to pop bubbles. Now, here's where the bubbles are your friend. So, the satin enamels are matte. The Amsterdam purple is glossier than the satin enamels. It does not have to be a high gloss paint. It just needs to be glossier than your matte paints to get a reaction. So when you get these little air bubbles trapped in the underlying layers, if you pop that bubble and it comes to the top and it brings some of the paint with it, that paint is hydrophobic. The matte paints want to push the glossy paints away, and that is what is giving the cells. That's kind of the idea behind when you are using, you know, matte makeup. It's pushing the oil away, pushing the shiny away. This isn't pushing oil away, it's just pushing the shiny away. But as these cells come to the top, as those little air bubbles come up and it's bringing that matte paint with it and it's having that hydrophobic effect, those little teeny tiny cells get bigger. And if I am patient and allow it to grow, I'm just going to recenter my center. If I'm patient and allow those cells to grow before I tilt, then I can get some really cool looking 3D boulder cells. I could stretch it right away and still get cells, but they would all kind of be this shape and size. They would, I call them pearl cell, or some people call them pearl cells, I call them pop-up cells. Names have changed over the years. Oh, I have some really pretty blending going on in here. That's going to be really pretty when that gets stretched out. So this is the part where patience is really important, because I want these cells to come to the top before I stretch it. I want those boulder cells. There are rainbows going on in the cells. And if I allow the cells to happen before I stretch it, then I can really emphasize that very cool blending that's going on. This part's hard. I know. The patience, this part, it's difficult. It's the hardest part. Besides getting your consistencies right. The patience is the hardest part of doing a straight pour, because you want to unwrap that present as soon as possible. But if someone were to say to you, the longer you wait to open this present, the nicer the present will be, it gives you a little bit of patience. So I try to look at it that way. You see, every time I hit this with the torch, I'm popping bubbles. Little tiny cells pop up and they get bigger. And so when I stretch this, I'm going to lose a lot of this. A lot of this is going to get stretched off. And the center part is going to grow and look very 3D. There's some cool, really cool blending going on in there. So I'm excited to see how that turns out. Whether to spin or tilt. Just a little something while I'm being patient and allowing these cells pop up. If I am painting on a rectangle, I will tilt. If I am using a square or a round, I may tilt or I may spin. I am more likely to spin when I'm using a round. I'm not looking for symmetry when I'm using a rectangle. But a lot of times when I have a square or a round, I do want some kind of like symmetry going on. When I said that if your edge is dry, it won't come off easily, you can see this little area here. There was a little dry spot on the side and it was resisting. So it wasn't coming off the same way. And the same right here. You can see it's not coming off as smoothly. This is definitely more paint than I needed. Trying to fit a lot of colors onto one canvas, it's kind of hard to not overuse the paint, or to use more than you need. When I'm pouring into a straight pour, I want the paints to sink, so I have to pour it from up high to give it the velocity. It's hard to do that with less than an ounce. I'm doing it, but it's hard. Okay. So you can see the difference, what has happened as I have allowed this to sit and allow the paint puddle to percolate. It's lots of cells have popped up. Going to touch up some of these sides that have dried up a bit, so when I spin it, it all comes off easily. You could just grab some drippings to do that, or if you have any left in your cup, or a lot of times I just pull it off with my little putty knife. I like to give it the best chance that it's got to spin evenly. Any spots that look dry, I'm just giving them a touch. Okay, I think we're good. All right, you can see that made it, or where'd it go? Oh, this is dry over here. How it makes a difference just wetting those areas. It starts to even out. Okay, one more pop of bubbles, and I'm gonna give this a spin. I know it's hard to sit through this part. I think it's been 5, 6, 7 minutes, 8 minutes maybe since I poured it, maybe more. But this is what is going to yield the best result cell-wise. If these were fresher paints, the cells would have popped up a lot faster and there would be a lot more of them already. So because they're not the freshest paints, I need to be a little patient. All right, let's give this a twirl. The one thing I want to do is make sure that my center is centered. Whatever else happens, I can deal with it. But in a spiral, my preference is to try to keep it centered. You do not have to spin fast. That is a very common misconception. Spinning slowly allows you to keep an eye on your composition. Like, I kind of want to keep this, but I know that it's just going, this is probably just going to wind up pulling and dripping off. But I want to make sure I don't spin off too much of that. Also, I want to be able to keep some of these really cool intergalactic looking cells here. Let me see how much this paint is still moving. Okay. Might be able to get away with that. Just give this a double check here and make sure there's nothing that I need to spin off. Okay. I'm actually going to leave this alone. I'm going to let it sit and do what it's going to do. More cells will pop up. But got some lovely contrast going on there. The yellow ended up in the center the way that I wanted it to. I like, if I'm using a dark background, I want my lightest color to be in the center. I want that to be the focus. If I'm using a light color, then I want the darkest color to be in the center. I want that contrast in the center to give me a focal point. Okay, I'm going to let this sit and I'll bring you in for a close-up and you'll get to see some of these super cool multicolored rainbow-ish cells. Can't really call it rainbow because I didn't use green, but very happy with this. All right, back in a few. Okay, here it is. Very happy with how this came out. Some beautiful blending in there with the pink and the violet and the yellow. No mud. Lots of beautiful multicolored cells. Really cool blending. It's really pretty. Let me see the orange. Sometimes the camera just gets confused. There we go. But I'm very happy with this piece. That's a funky cell right there. It's like a bunch of cells in the cell. Neato. But there it is. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed. Please do like, share, and subscribe and all that good stuff. Make sure you click the bell so you receive notifications when I put up new content. I will be having another art auction on August 16th at 7 p.m. Eastern right here on the YouTube. I will even probably have some watercolors in that auction. Some stuff you've never seen before. But yeah. So do check that out. Check out the description box below for links to my PayPal tip jar if you feel so inclined, my website, GinaDeLuca.net, where you can find the art, or my art and music, and the fluid art inspiration cards. The cards are also on Amazon, of course. You'll also find links to my affiliates, DecoArt being one of them. Get your hands on some of these awesome cell making paints. Any products that you... This color keeps shifting. Stop doing that. If you use the links provided, there are also coupon codes. But if you use my affiliate links, I will make a small commission at no additional cost to you, so that helps me out. You'll also find the link to our Facebook group. Go make some art. Join us there. Post your masterpieces. Ask your questions. Get some inspiration. A good time is had by most. It is the internet after all. I think that's it. All right. That's it for me. I hope y'all have a beautiful day. Now go make some art.